Hi, Doug. How are you?
How are you?
Good. I'll give a quick introduction because I have noticed that I'm remiss in, I'm usually good about introducing my guests. I'm never introduced myself, which is ridiculous because most people know my guests and most people don't know me. So I'm Melissa McLeod and I do this great podcast with my friend Megan. I own a shop in Detroit called the Wool and the Floss, and Megan is from the Needlepoint Clubhouse in St. Louis, and we just get together and talk to some of our fabulous vendors, customers, suppliers, designers, whatever. And today we have Doug Kreinik, and Kreinik is such a famous name in the needlepoint world, but we're going to learn more about how it's a famous name in many more worlds. So welcome, Doug, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm really happy to be here. It's sorry for being so casual, but during these pandemic days, I used to dress up and we don't get any visitors anymore. So I am very, 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 very casual.
Good, good.
And you'll notice I haven't even gotten a haircut in 4 months. So,
well, that's par for the course these days, right?
Yeah.
Good. And you're in West Virginia, correct?
I'm in West Virginia. It used to be the best place for the virus because we hardly had any, and now it's become a hot spot because all people went to Myrtle Beach.
Well, I feel like every place takes its turn. Detroit was terrible. Now Detroit was pretty good. Now, but we'll all muddle along, and it's all going to be okay. And we all
it will be okay
to keep us happy in the meantime. So, and I am familiar with the fact from talking to you at market and things that Kreinik is a longtime family business. So I'd love history.
The story behind the whole thing is my dad was working for a chemical company and they fired all of the employees 55 and older. And my dad was 56 and a half. And he was looking all over for a job, and his former boss didn't want him getting a job because he knew too much. And so he was having no luck. And my parents were somewhere in Delaware, and they were driving the car, and my mom was doing her needlepoint and was all over the car. And my dad said, with all your background in couturier design, because my mom used to teach at different universities, couturier design, he said, can't you come up with some way of organizing your threads so they're not all over the car? This is really annoying me. So she went home and she created the first needlework organizer on the market. And so and different friends said, oh, Stella, I really like that. Can you make one for me? So she started making these things. And actually, I have one here.
Oh, good. I was just going to say, I wonder if we could see that. That's great.
Yes, this is it right here. So it was it had a place for the canvas and the threads, and then it had a place for the needles and the scissors, and then it would fold up in like that, and then you could tie it like that, and then you put the ribbon through the little eye hole. And she made this on her machine at home.
So this is clearly not a frame.
And so that was the first needlework organizer on the market. And so she'd make these things, and then after about 9 months, when my dad was going around looking for a job, at that time there were thousands of needlepoint shops. There were, I think, 10,000 needlepoint shops. So every little town had a needlepoint shop. So every place he'd go, he'd sell this thing. So after about 9 months, he said, well, nobody's going to hire me. So he went into business with my mom. And so he was really into lean manufacturing before the word was even invented. And he created all these little riggings so they could produce things faster. And so it was very cool. And then my mom was making those things and making other things connected with that. And then they came out with backgammon boards, and they came out with these little chair stools that you could do needlepoint on top. And then he was also going out and selling needlepoint for like Mazel Tov and Tina, some of the really big, some of the really big companies at the time. So then in 1978, they came in with a line of silk, and they sold silk totally differently. Instead of selling it in hanks, they sold it by the strand. And they had a device, and I don't have one here, but it was they call it the hanger-all. And the hanger-all held about 2 different colors of silk thread, and the shop owner would be sold these groupings of silk thread, and they could sell it by the strand. And so that's how they first sold it. And they almost got sued by other companies that sold this particular silk because they were selling so much. So
And for
they
people
would,
that haven't stitched forever, like, I mean, I'm really, I like to think I'm not that old, but I've been stitching since I was 7. So selling by the strand sounds really unusual maybe to the new stitcher, but back in the day when we had pattern iron and pretty much nothing else,
right,
we would sell pattern iron by the strand.
right.
And actually, in the really old days, this shop had big bins on the wall, and they'd pull the giant hanks down and they'd pull out the strands for.
Wow, wow.
Sounds kind of strange to any newer stitcher. Like, why would you sell by the strand? But that was how things
Well,
were.
and it was, and plus silk was so much more expensive. And
Right.
so people might do the faces or the hands, and the rest of it was done in wool or
Right.
acrylic. And then my dad used to work for the Department of Navy in the early 50s. And one of the projects he was working on was using a coated plastic material to make the regalia that the Admiralty would wear. And they didn't like it because it didn't oxidize in seawater. So he put that in the back of his brain. In fact, when we were little kids, he was also working on space clothing back in the early 50s. And this fabric that he had was coated with silver. And when you ironed it, it smelled like skunk. And so the military threw it away. Well, he took it out of the garbage can. And that one Halloween, we all had Flash Gordon outfits. So,
To or not.
so anyway, he was walking around in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the late 70s and saw some samplers with metal thread in it. And he said, wow, you know, back in the 50s, I was working on this material. And so he came up with the idea of braiding metallics so that he could emulate metal threads. And that's where, well, the first issue of this was Balget. And they called it Balget because my parents liked French names. My mom was a French major in college. So they had its French name. And they said, well, that makes it fancy. So then as time went on, we changed the name to Kreinik because people were looking all around for Mr. Balget, and they couldn't find him. So we put everything under, a friend of ours who was in advertising came in and said, are you trying to sell Balget, or are you trying to sell the brand name Kreinik? And we went, oh. So we changed everything to Kreinik. And so we can always tell when somebody, like lately, people have been digging out of their stashes projects they were working 30 years ago and 35 years ago, and they're asking us for Balget, and we're going, this must be an old project.
Right. Well, and I had a lot of customers who asked me for that. And when I first opened the shop, I knew what they meant, but I was like, was that I honestly didn't know if it was a completely different product or if it was one and the same. So I thought it was one and the same. So I'm really glad to know that.
It's same product, yeah. And over the years, sometimes we've changed the numbers, and that's confused people. But so yeah, so when my parents started out, they had size 8, size 16, and 32, and the filament. At the time, there was a lot going on in cross stitch. Cross stitch has changed a lot over the years. Cross stitch is coming back, and because more people are looking for things to do during this period of time, stay home. But they had those 4, and then there was a period of time when my mom said, well, I don't think everybody likes blending filament. It's really hard to use. Why don't you come out with number 4? And we said, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. So we humored her, and we came out with number 4, and lo and behold, number 4 became one of the most popular items we've ever had because you could use it in blending filament and in needlepoint. In fact, some of the designers out there take, they'll take like, they'll put 12 down first, and then on top of that, they'll put 8, and then on top of that, they'll put 4 to give it more dimension. So it's really interesting.
A little fun fact, which maybe you had talked about along the way, but I was trying to sit in front of my Kreinik wall to show off your gorgeous threads, but the light wasn't working for me. So I pulled out just a little selection, which then dawned on me. I don't know if most people realize this, but this little color prettiness right here is like magic. And I didn't know this for years of stitching. So if you pull out that 35-year-old stash, now I don't know, maybe 35 years ago you weren't this smart and color-coded everything, but
well,
now
35 years ago, we had things on cardboard spools.
Oh, true.
And then we changed to the plastic spools, and we have 2 different sizes of plastic spools. And so We have, and each type has a different color. Each type of material has a different color. So, because people relate more to color coding.
Well, and I
And
have
also my employees relate more to color coding.
well, and customers will call me and they say, I need some more of that gold thread. Well, was it on a big fat spool or a little skinny spool? And then if they say it's a skinny spool, I'm like, do you remember if it was pink or blue? And so we can get down to over the phone what they needed, which is
Right, right.
brilliant. So so just to further this, like your number 8s have pink, your number 12s have blue, and all of these people out there I know right this moment are going, oh my God.
Right. Well, another thing you might want to show them is how to open the small spool.
Well, I will. However, I've done it before and they're so well made that I've cracked my thumbnail in half because this pulls up, right?
Yeah, because you take 2 fingers and just jimmy it up a little bit.
Yeah, but it never, I think my fingers aren't strong enough.
Yeah, I usually take my
I've
fingernails and do
put
it.
my thumb in there before and cracked my nail in half.
Oh, okay.
Usually your winders or your machinery or whatever does this part leaves a little sticking out so you can unwind
Yeah.
it. And then the beauty is that people don't realize is you can rewind it back in there. So to your father's point, your needlepoint threads don't end up everywhere. So
Right, exactly. Well, what's really funny is when we got into the scrapbook market, we went there and we had skeins of this and skeins of that. And people were saying, well, first they'd say, well, that's really interesting string. And of course, you know, there's a shudder that went through my body. And then they would say, well, how do you use this? So we decided that you can't, that we had to start switching everything to spools because they didn't know how to deal with skeins. And
right.
because we used to put the Japan thread in skeins, we used to put the facets, the chenille in skeins, and actually putting on spools makes more sense because you don't have as much waste.
Oh, good. We all like that.
Keep things better.
So good. So I know that you've been at this a long time. Have you? What's your background besides being the loyal son who?
Well, when I first got out of college, I went into retailing, and I was an assistant operations manager for a discount store. And for years, I couldn't enter that store because of the smell of popcorn and candy apples. I just couldn't stand it. Then I traveled a bit, and I came back home, and I got a job as a buyer in a department store. I was hired as an assistant buyer, and then within 3 days, they made me buyer because somebody quit. So I was a buyer for the notions, greeting cards, and stationery department.
Okay.
And and it was interesting at that time. Backgammon was really big, so I would buy games for the notions department, and I met all these people. And at the time, my parents were coming out with backgammon boards, and they had somebody making designs for them. So I was able to find them the wholesaler for the discs, the parts, the dice, and all that. So they bought those from that person. So that was really kind of interesting. And what I would do, I would have all these business trips, buying trips that I go for, and I'd go up to New York, and I would go on a Friday. I had to be there on a Monday, so I'd go there on a Friday, and oftentimes my parents had a needlepoint show up in New York. So I'd work their show, and one time I walked into, it was in a hotel, Penta Hotel. I walked into the room, and I said, oh my God. So I ran up and got my mom, who was visiting with somebody else. I said, Mom, you got to come downstairs. Hugh Downs is in the booth. And because Hugh Downs' wife had a shop in Arizona. And so my mom came down, and Hugh Downs was gone. And I said, Dad, that was so cool. He said, what? I said, the last guy who was in here. He said, you look familiar. I said, that was Hugh Downs.
I love it. Oh, that's great. So do you do any crafting yourself?
I used to do a lot of needlepoint. I don't do any needlepoint now. But when things come, like weaving, I saw that one time I went to a show, and I saw, my God, all these companies have all these little rigid head looms. I said, there's a trend here, and I got to be involved in that. So I wanted to see where my materials fit into the weaving world. So I went out and I bought a rigid head loom, and I learned that the braids are great for warp and weft. And so that was very exciting for me. So I did a little bit of weaving for a period of time, and we hired a student one summer, and she did weaving for me using our materials. And another summer we hired somebody to do knitting, and she was from the fashion school up in Morgantown, West Virginia, and came down and she did knitting for us using our materials. So we had those things at our shows. But I don't do lie. I like to bake. During this period of time, I baked a lot of bread and cookies. I made pretzels the other day, and I've really gotten into that. I've taught myself how to bake, so that's been a lot of fun.
And I kind of jumped over a chapter with you. How did you get from your corporate world to ending up being?
Oh, well, I had moved down to Dallas from Charleston, West Virginia, and I was working for nonprofits and other things like that, and I couldn't stand it. So I decided that one of the things in the late 70s that was big was computers. So I went to computer school, and I became a computer programmer. And I found out I really enjoyed that. It was really, they'd always give me the really hard problems to figure out, and my mind works differently. And so I was a computer programmer for 4 years, and then my parents said, our business is expanding a little bit. This is 1983. And by that time, my wife and I wanted to leave Dallas because it was getting very crowded and we wanted to move to North Carolina. And so they said, you're planning on leaving, so why don't you come and work for us for 2 years? So that was 1983. And so it's been 37 years. So, but when I came in, everything was done by hand. All the accounting work was done by hand. And so it took me a year to convince my mom that maybe we should have computers. And so we had computers, and we really grew with computers, and we've always kept it pretty high tech. We actually were on the internet in 1992.
That's pretty.
We've been on a long time. Our newest iteration of our website, which we've been working on for 2 years, it's just tough. There's so many different phases that we're going through, but it's going to be translated into 105 languages.
Wow.
Because we do business in lots of different places.
Well, I was that when I was looking, I felt like I knew a decent amount about you, but before we start these things, I always dig around a little bit, and I guess I kind of knew you had to be distributing worldwide, but then to see the list of your distributors worldwide, I was like, wow.
Yeah, I've done shows in England, and I've done shows in Russia, and I actually did I did a couple classes in Russia, and most of the people spoke English, and I always had an interpreter, and I was at this one class where I was teaching, and I'm a kidder. I like to kid, and so I said that this material that we have here can be used to do woolly boogers. A woolly booger is a type of fishing fly. Okay. And so the interpreter went, "What's a woolly booger?" So because she was more interested in directing me and talking about needlework and not fishing, but her boss was sitting in the back said, "Yeah, talk about fishing too." So because we deal in all different sorts of industries. In fact, we have a brochure that we send out to the shops that says how to lure in the fly fisherman.
Right. I've seen it because we live right on the lake. I haven't actually been successful yet, but I need to get back to that. But right now, thankfully, the needlepoint world has blown up. So. Oh
my God. Well, the fishing world also did the same thing because people were sitting home making flies, and because the fishing industry and the needlework industry have the same seasons.
Right.
Because when you come to spring, people go out and garden, or when you come out to spring, people go fishing.
Gotcha. Good. Well, and that's what's really interesting is you sell your product to so many different segments, and I don't think most people realize that either. I mean, they think needlepoint, cross stitch, and they don't really think you do much else, but you do a lot of other really interesting things.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to be involved with Game of Thrones and the costuming there, and they bought this one. No, they ordered this one 12-yard piece, and we said, 12 yards, let's just send it to them. So they gave us their FedEx number, and we sent it to Ireland, where they were doing costuming for Queen Circe, and it was her shoulder piece, and it looked like metal, and that was our 3/8 inch ribbon braid with wire in it. And so put an order in right after that for the final season. So I watched the whole season. It was very dark watching the last season. And so I said, I still didn't see our materials. And then very last minute, the robe that was put on the Queen of the North was embellished and embroidered with our silks and metallics. So it's really cool.
Very cool. I'll have to tell my husband that he's a huge Game of Thrones fan, and he's really not that big of a needlepoint fan. So he'll love that.
Well, my daughter is in television, and she's working on some period pieces. And I keep saying, remember Dad.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and then we work with fashion designers. We work with Kate Spade. She put a bracelet out a number of years ago, and we would send the product over to, she had these little factories set up in Rwanda. So we would send the product over to Rwanda, and then they'd send the product back to the U.S. And then we've worked with other big names out there in the fashion industry. I'm working with a Romanian designer right now, and I mean, last week there was a call from Norway from a fisherman, and there was a call from Spain from somebody making bracelets. And so, I mean, we're all over the place, and it makes it fun for people in the factory here because they go, where's this one going, you know? So,
well, I'm presuming, and I apologize, I don't know the answer to this, your parents are probably no longer with us?
My dad passed away about, I think it was 8 years ago, and my mom passed away about 5 years ago. Well, and my mom actually retired from the business in 1988. And she just kind of hung around. Then my dad, we kind of retired him when he was 93. He passed away when he was 96.
He loved what he did, and I bet
he loved what he did, and he just wanted to be around. But
yeah, and I bet they've loved watching what you've done with this business.
Yeah, it was really, at one point there were other family members in the business. At one point there were 6 family members in the business. There was my parents, my brother, his wife, my wife, and me. And then as time went on, my wife went back into being a school counselor, and then my mom went out, and then my sister-in-law, Jacqueline, went out, and then my brother and I were in business for about 20 years, and then he went out, and he's working for state of Maryland now, and he gets to travel all over the place.
Nice, nice. And I love that you're continuing onwards. So that's awesome. And obviously 2020, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's maybe been a challenging year for you business.
It's been a very, very challenging year. We were closed for 6 weeks. In fact, one thing I learned that we could do, we had some extra machines, and I had been to a factory where we bought some machines one time in Italy, and they were making machines that process elastic. So I said, well, I think we can make elastic. So I found a resource for raw elastic material and brought it in because there was a shortage of elastic at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we started making elastic, and we supplied the West Virginia National Guard with 11,000 yards of elastic. And so one of my customer service people said to me, well, you know, Doug, the word on the street is the reason people can't get their thread is because Kreinik has stopped producing thread, and they're just producing elastic. Well, we still have 140 machines producing thread, and we have 8 machines producing elastic.
Ah, well,
so,
and even if you were, that was the right thing to do in my heart anyways. Like,
yeah, it was really good. I mean, and I never have dealt with so many people from West Virginia. I mean, we started doing factory tours, and we stopped that until next year. And we have a company store here, and we don't let people come and visit. And so one of my friends who works at the Restore said, hey, Doug, you want me to put this out on my website that you're producing elastic? I said, oh, go ahead. Not realizing it had 17,000 friends on there. And so we got calls from all over the place, and we had calls from all over West Virginia. You know, when we have these tours, I always ask people, so where are you from? And they go, oh, I'm from Canada, or I'm from Hawaii or California. And so these 3 ladies came in one time, and I said, where are you from? And they said, Parkersburg. And I said, what are you doing here? Nobody from Parkersburg ever shops here. So, but we have more and more people coming up here. And there's one woman who's purchased, I think, almost 10 rolls of our elastic because it's very soft, and it's not made of latex. It's made of polyurethane and nylon. So it's very soft, and it won't affect people who are allergic to rubber.
So is that something you're still doing then right
Yeah,
now?
we're still making that, and we just started making it in black too. So we have white and black.
And is that something you think you'll do forevermore, or just until
Yeah, it's
there's?
made on some machines that were extra machines. So we just run. Actually, one of the machines we're running it on was a machine we ran our 1/4 inch, and that's why 1/4 inch is not available right now, because
Oh,
we're making elastic on that. And when it slows down, we'll go back to making 1/4 inch. But
gotcha.
of course, after we stopped making 1/4 inch became popular, and we're going
Welcome to the world of the retailer, trying to
exactly.
people like. But you knew that going in with your
Oh
background.
yeah,
And so have you had other issues? Because I know everything's made in the US, but are some of the inputs into your product from overseas?
No, we in closing down for 6 weeks, it really we were like 5 and 6 weeks behind in orders, and so of course everybody wants things right now, and we can't get it to them.
Waiting on mine too, but
I
that's
know. Yeah, I think it's coming out this week. Anyway, I have people working. I had one woman working an extreme amount of overtime last week,
yeah.
and I said, "Are you burned out yet?" And she said, "Well, I'm not going to do Saturdays anymore." So I mean, we are trying our best,
It's
and plus at this period of time, I don't want to hire anybody
I'm in
because I'm afraid to hire new people into the mix,
into
and
the
so I have to protect the people here, and
right.
so it's tough. I have to hire a new customer service person because I had one walk out on me. She texted me, and what? And she knew she was leaving, but she could have given me 2 weeks because then we could have. So I've been interviewing people last week and this week, and it's just, I mean, it's amazing. And we have to say, if they come in and they don't have a mask on, well, that's one mark off, And so, but we make sure everybody is masked and try to keep everybody 6 feet away. And we're having we're in really need of a new roof, so we're having a new roof put on Friday, and so we're asking them to bring their own porta potty.
Oh gosh. Well, that's the way world we're in. So you
So,
alluded to two things that I've wondered too. Like how big is your operation? Like in terms of like, is your warehouse like an acre long? Or how many
no, I wish. No, we're very small, and when people come and visit us, they go, "My God, you've squashed so much into a small area." We are building a warehouse behind our building because we've been renting warehouse space forever, and I should have probably built this 20 years ago. And so we're building that, so it's going to be right behind our building. And I have 18 employees,
Okay.
and we start work at 3 at night and go until 5 at night. 3 in the morning and 5 till 5 at night. And so I have people who want to work midnight shifts. I go, more power to you.
Right.
And I don't like doing that. And then my customer service people are during the day, and we try to keep everything really personal with our customers. Like we're getting a new phone system after 30 years, and it's going to be digital. And they said, "Do you want it so that we can have an answering service on there? If you want line 1 or line 2." I said, "No, we want to keep it personal because I hate those things."
I hate them.
You're welcome.
Like I can't listen to all these options. I'm overwhelmed.
I know.
I picked a doctor once based on that. I was pregnant with her, and I'm like, I can't go back to the old practice because I can't listen to how many options when I had pregnancy brain. So the next doctor when I picked it was one of my main things, like, does a person answer your phone? Oh, well, good. So give us a rundown on your threads. I'm sure that you can tell us your best sellers, your worst sellers, if you have a personal favorite. If you think there's
Well, we have a lot of gold. People like shades of gold. So we have lots of gold. And then we have different shades of white. We have white, we have pearl. We have a pearl that has like a purple shade to it, and then one with a copper shade to it. And then we have an off-white, which is like an oyster. And then one that's very popular is marshmallow. So you can do shadings of white. You can do shadings. because people want to do shadings. They don't want just gold,
Right.
red. So they like shadings of things. So it gives things more depth and it makes it more interesting.
For sure.
And so those are some of the things I really like. And I like to experiment sometimes in making blends. Some blends don't work. I did some research a couple of years ago to find out, okay, one of my distributors says I have too many colors, I got to reduce. So I went in and studied, and one color sold one spool the whole year. I said, maybe I should delete that from my list. So we've found colors that we could delete. And then, of course, people expect us to come out with new colors every year. So we came out with new colors beginning of the year, and I don't have them on my desk here, but they are, when they were selling, they were very successful, and they were a really interesting pink, for instance, was selling. Do you have them? They were fun colors. Yep, there we go. That's a really interesting thing.
Isn't there a gold too? There's too many golds over there.
There's a gold also, which is a different shade of gold. But those three colors are really cool colors.
Very pretty. Very pretty.
I really like them. And let me see. So that, so it changes all the time. My favorites and colors and all, but we still try to experiment, and see if there's something new we can do with different textures and all that. One of the items we have that I know you don't have is our iron-on thread. We came out with iron-on thread.
I don't even have an iron, Doug, so I don't have. I don't even own an iron. It's an embarrassment.
Oh, well, see, it's not called an iron anymore. It's a crafting tool.
There we go.
I learned that when I went to Quilt Market, and these ladies would tell me, I don't iron. I said, oh, well, this is a crafting tool. And, the little clover iron, crafting iron has a little point on it.
Retail, I have a steamer.
Okay.
In retail, so you know what I'm talking about, like the big Jiffy steamer. So
right.
Everything. So I don't even own an iron. So anyways, but I can see a need for this. So please tell me more. Sorry.
Yeah. So it can be used on top of a regular needlepoint if it's to be hung, but we came out with this for the scrapbook market, and to replace, of all things, glitter. But it didn't work because the books didn't call for glitter. They didn't call for our stuff. They called for glitter, and we said, well, glitter is actually made of the same material, only chopped up very finely. They said, but it calls for glitter. I can't use your stuff. And so the scrapbook market went, because in needlepoint, there's hundreds of stitches, and you can do all sorts of imaginary things and create textures. And the scrapbook market kind of went downhill because the like Epson printer came out with all sorts of patterns that you could print out all sorts of page decorations, and then you could put your pictures in there. They didn't need anything, so you make books, and so that's what happened to the scrapbook market. Yeah. But then there's there's the knitting market, which is kind of conservative, and we try to get in there by having add-on threads. So you take like a 3-ply blending filament and add it with your yarn, and so you can customize your yarns. Right. One thing that was successful was the reflective thread. The reflective thread you can see from 50 feet away, and so you can add that into anything. We've had people add it into needlepoint, and in town here, they had a yarn bombing. They first had to explain that it wasn't a terrorist act, so. And I hope this isn't showing in Parkersburg. No. Anyway, so we had, I gave them the reflective, and they put it in Christmas decorations. And they hung those on a tree. And the guy from the newspaper came over and said, I heard Kreinik is involved in this somehow. What did he do? And so they said, well, at night, go out to this tree, and with your flash on your camera, use the flash. And the whole tree went.
Oh, I love it.
It was great. So it was a lot of fun. So, and that's the thing, needlepoint and any of these crafts should be fun. It shouldn't be something that, there's only one way of doing it. I remember I was a judge at a cross-stitch fair one time, and this one teacher said, well, this person has stitched it from, I think it was left to right instead of right to left.
Oh, wow.
And I said, and the person who did the stitching had been in the state prison. And so, you know, they were active and they were doing this. And I came out with, it's supposed to be fun. You know, yes, there are ways of doing this, but if they're having fun and they're keeping busy and they like what they make, that's all that counts.
That's something I say very regularly because I write a lot of stitch guides, and people say this stitch is giving me a really hard time, and I say, well, then let's change it.
Yes.
Why are you doing this? This is supposed to be your relaxing hobby, me time, and if it's not fun, then something's going completely.
You're absolutely right.
So I can't agree with that part more. Do you have a thread that you've so I'm going to bring up a thread that you convinced me to bring in the last time we were at market together, which sadly has been a while now.
Yeah.
And this is kind of in honor of my friend Megan, because my friend Megan is known for telling everyone how much she hates to bead. So your facets is like the bead hater's best friend.
Right.
If you couch this on, I'm going to put it in front of my face because then you can see it. This is, I think, is this 032? Yes. This is 032 regular facets, and it looks like little beads. So you can couch that in a line and throw that beading needle in the trash can if you are an anti-beader.
And if you bead it with, for instance, if you would take even the pearl blending filament and bead that down, you couldn't see how it was attached.
Right, right.
And so it make it really interesting.
Yeah, so back to it, things should be fun. So if something says, oh, you need to have beads, and someone goes, ugh, here's your new best friend right here. So.
Well, what we found out, if you look at braids too, when the I can't remember what it's called, but in embroidery, if you use like the ribbon braid, see, braids react this way. You can bend and curve them around. You can go around curves. And where a ribbon is woven, and so you can't move it, so it folds. But a braid will form around in a circle. And so you can take those braids and you can make really interesting like florets with the braids. You can even take the ribbon braid and hold it in your fingers like this and pull on one thread, and you can bunch together so you can create ruching.
I do that quite a bit.
You know, 150, 200 colors. So it's really cool. In fact, on the iron-on thread, the interesting thing about that is it has no right side or wrong side. So you can iron on top of one another. You can also do perfect circles with the iron-on thread. So you don't have the mess of glue and glitter, you know, to do these things.
So I'm guessing if I were to ask you what you think your most underrated thread type is, you're maybe going to say
iron-on thread is the most underrated thread.
Well, maybe you should pop one in my box.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, you can charge me for it. You don't have to give it.
Okay. I send samples out all the time.
It'd be fun. I love trying new things. So
yeah, and you can iron it right onto. Well, at one time we were selling crystals too, and the crystals could be ironed right onto the canvas. But it just it wasn't a big deal in the needlepoint business. And finally, I found somebody who was in the crystal business. I said, "Here's a good deal." I sold all my crystals. Just get rid of them.
Sometimes you can only do so many things, you know.
Yep.
There's day, and you got to do what makes sense for your business.
Yep.
So well,
yeah, because I've tried all different sorts of things, and sometimes I have to go. You're getting too wide here. You gotta.
Right. I know it's easy to do though, because you see the next new shiny object. You're like, ooh, I can do that. I can make that work.
Right.
Exciting. Well, I know that you were doing some seminars in shops, which obviously is not happening now.
Right.
So do you have a plan for like a substitute for that?
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. I had planned to give a talk down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama at a shop. And this hit, and all of a sudden we said, well, what can we do? And she said, well, I do a lot of my work online anyway, and we can set up an online class. And so we took about 2,000 photographs of samples we have, and we culled it down to about probably 250. And then I learned PowerPoint. I had always hated PowerPoint. Now I love PowerPoint. So I created this PowerPoint presentation, and I even had it down where I could draw pictures on it. And that was really cool because show this picture and then this picture. And so it was very cool. I like that. And the class was 2.5 hours long. and nobody fell asleep. It was great. Because I know when I get on, problem when I do a lot of Zoom meetings, like Rotary does Zoom meetings, and if the speaker is not too interesting, I'm going.
Hopefully no one's falling asleep to us right now, but
Right.
okay.
But it's really interesting because now I realize that I can teach anywhere. I've been wanting to teach in Hawaii for years, and I'd love to go back to Hawaii and teach. But now I can offer them the class in Hawaii. And so I have my class packet, and so the shop owner buys the class packet, and so everybody has a sample of all the different types of threads that I manufacture, and then I show all these different samples of needlepoint, cross stitch, tatting, scrapbooking, jewelry making, all sorts of things, and fly fishing, so people can see all different ways that the same material can be used in all different ways.
Right.
Makes life more interesting.
Good. Well, I think we should talk about you maybe doing that for us. But in the
Okay.
meantime, do they just find out about these through their local shops?
Yeah. The local shops advertise that they're going to, like, I'm scheduled to do. I've been rescheduled a couple of times to do a class out at the Needle Pointer out in Seattle. And first we were going to do it at 1 month. I said, I'm not going on a plane. And then it was supposed to be in October. I said, I'm still not going on a plane. So it's scheduled for next year. So I'm not sure if it's going to be me live there or online, because half the people in that class were going to be online anyway. So I might just do the whole thing online. And that way I'm more available because I don't have to travel and spend time on the road. Though I like doing that. This is, in fact, the first time in 37 years that I've been in Parkersburg for 5 months straight.
I bet.
And I like eating in different types of restaurants, and they don't have that here.
Yeah, there's definitely some silver linings of staying at home, but some things we're all missing a lot.
So I baked a lot of cookies and made a lot of bread and pretzels and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, great. Well, I could talk to you forever. I think you are just such an interesting guy, and I love everything you do. So I so appreciate you spending time with us. Have we missed anything that you want to include?
I don't. Let me look at these questions here. No, I think we covered about everything. I added a couple of things too. Yeah, I think we covered everything. So this has been really a fun way of doing an interview. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Well, I so appreciate you spending time with us. For those that are watching us, this will obviously be aired on Saturday night, and I'm Pointing It Out podcast on YouTube. And if you can hit that subscribe button, that helps other stitchers and cross stitchers and other Kreinik lovers find us in whichever way they can, and that helps support our channel and spread the love to other people. So we appreciate it. So I will look forward to talking to you soon, Doug, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melissa.
Okay, take
It was a lot
care.
of fun. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.